Welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks Pro. Let's get started.
Welcome back to another episode of the Growth Minded Accountant podcast. My name is Lee Reams. I am the founder and CEO of CountingWorks and our sister company, TaxBuzz.com. So, as I've promised, I am finally going to do hopefully a short form growth minded accountant that is focusing on tax season. And what we're trying to do is just give like little micro episodes or there's a few takeaways that you can actually go apply today, tomorrow. And the first one we're talking about is reframing the tax interview from tax prep to advisor. As always, Rebecca Barton, our Chief Visibility Officer, is back with me. Rebecca, if you could say hello.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm excited to do these during tax season with you. I think they're going to be really good.
All right, so let's talk about something that happens hundreds of times during tax season, the tax interview. Most of you are still scheduling and using AI to prep you and maybe perhaps even delivering intake forms before, but you're still there, not just collecting data, you're trying to position your firm and ask questions. So what you're trying to do here is clients decide what you are in the first few minutes. So is this a compliance discussion, or perhaps, is this just a tax person? If you start getting pigeonholed there, it's really hard to change later. So clients don't decide whether you're an advisor based on what you offer. They decide based on how you start the conversation. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to give you some real concrete examples. We're not going to make this super long, but let's kind of start with what the mistake is. Again, if you're going for compliance and trying to get an advisory, this episode is for you. So the first thing is, what is the mistake, right? And I would say jumping straight into forms, documents, and checklists, no questions about what's going on in life, right? Your clients are going to immediately think this is transactional service, right? They're going to be thinking, the clock is on. How long does this take to finish? What are they going to charge me based on the labor side? And that's kind of the way that, I guess, workflow works. But the shift here is you need to start reframing the interview as context first, okay? Numbers second. So you're not charging the service, you're not changing the service. You're just changing the order of the way you do things. And I want to give an example of kind of how this works. And I'm going to start, Rebecca, before I jump you in. And I have an example of kind of like a doctor meeting, right? And then I want to talk to you about how we do work with our clients and even on kind of the way we onboard them and the way we use the same concept to kind of change the narrative as well. So let's think about this. Two doctors. Dr. Ray looks at the chart, asks symptoms, prescribes, walks out the door, right? How many times have you had that experience, right? Dr. B asked about lifestyle, stress, work, goals, then looks at the chart, connects the dots. Maybe there was something, a lifestyle change or a stressful event at work that maybe is creating the pain that you're in there for, right? Same diagnosis, different perceived value, okay? Most accountants don't act like Dr. A during tax season. Most advisors act like Dr. B, even if the tax return is the exact same. So I'm trying to just slight changes in the way you deal with client, the way you ask questions. And I'll give you some examples here in a reframe, but I just want to talk about how we've done this with our own clients and even our own processes so we can get better outcomes for our clients. So when they come to us, let's say for a website, they think, or SEO services, they think, kind of reframe this, Rebecca, on how we approach this and how it changes the game on what that outputted narrative actually looks like. And, obviously then the ROI and the results from it.
Yeah. So when I sit down with a client, a new client, a conversion client, really anyone, our goal is not to get the technical data first. We're not going to ask you, what's your domain name? Do you have Google Analytics? Do you have a Google business profile? We'll get to all of those questions, of course, but that's not what we do out of the gate. Out of the gate, we're asking you, why did you get into this business? Who are the clients you serve? Who's your ideal client? What is your goal for your business within the next 5 years? Once we have that foundation where we've established who you are, why you do what you do, why you love what you do, and who you're passionate about serving, then we're able to create a much better website for you. We're able to put out much better SEO and geo services for you because it's all interconnected. And the more we understand who you are as a business owner and who it is that you want to help with your tax and accounting services, the better we're able to provide that foundation for you before we get into the boring technical commodity type of information. And the same thing applies, just like you were saying, Lee, with a tax interview or with a medical appointment. Anything can kind of fall into this bucket. And a lot of it is just in how you approach the situation, even though at the end you're going to get the same information. It's how you come at things that makes all the difference in how you're perceived.
Well, and what we're trying to do is position ourselves more as an agency than, again, you were throwing out SEO, geo, all these terms. The accountant, our client doesn't care, and
Right.
your client doesn't care either. So I'm going to reframe this for an actual tax interview, right? So, instead of starting with, hey, let's walk through your documents. That's usually the first thing that is, most firms, that is their workflow. That is their process. So start with, hey, before we dive into the numbers, I want to understand what changed for you this year. And then more importantly, what's coming next, right? And then I would say, hey, start giving some examples of context questions. So these are like, any decisions this year or next year, any big decisions, right? We're moving. We're thinking of selling our company. Oh my, that completely reframes the conversation from a compliance tax return to like sophisticated tax planning, right? Is your income steady, growing, or changing, right? Anything that surprised you financially last year? These are questions that are leading questions that are going to get input and knowledge that, again, AI tools have a hard time getting. This is where your relationship building happens, right? And you really only need to take a couple minutes to do this. Once you start with these leading questions, your clients are going to start talking. But what it does is it changes how everything else is interpreted. So advisory isn't a service you sell after tax season. It's a posture you take during tax season, okay? So after April 15th, there's ways to systemize this. But right now, let's just start with kind of seeding. We at CountingWorks Pro actually take it a step further. So I just gave you a quick takeaway. These are steps I would do in your tax appointments right now, right? But the thing that most firms miss, the tax interview is the spark, right? But what really transforms you from compliance to advisory is reinforcement. And what I mean by that, it's if the only time you sound like an advisor, it feels a little salesy, right? If you're only doing it through that 3-minute opening conversation, it really won't stick as if you were talking about it in your blogs. You're talking about forward-looking planning. You're talking about compliance versus advisory, right? If your newsletter explains decisions before they become tax problems. If your social media posts highlight strategy, not just deadlines. Are you kind of following this a little bit? And now you're not just saying, I'm an advisor. You're educating your clients like one. You're thinking like one. You're showing up like one. And that's when powerful things happen. So by the time a client walks into the tax interview, they already expect a bigger conversation, right? You've seeded it over time. And Rebecca, let's talk about repetition real quick, and then I'll finish this up. We want to keep these 5 to 10. But what is the importance of repetition, whether that be a political campaign or even a webinar? But how many times does a concept have to be heard before it starts taking place?
Psychologically, it's typically believed that 7 times, 7 touch points is kind of what people need, around 7, in order to really have information cemented. And it can be more than that. It can be a bit fewer, just depending on the person's individual psychology. But it's very, very important to keep repeating your points, because not only do these become what your brand is known for, these sort of maybe trio of talking points or whatever it is that you happen to have with your brand, but the more you repeat the same things, the more people start to associate you with whatever those touch points are. Furthermore, algorithmically, the more you post those same points over and over on social media, on your blog, etc., the more the internet is going to start associating you with those things. And therefore, it's going to recommend you and refer you more frequently to the right types of clients as it starts to understand who your firm is and what you're really about.
All right. So they've already read about income shifts, cash flow. They've already seen you talk about planning ahead, right? They've consumed content that frames you as a guide, not a form processor. This is really important as you move to advisory. So when you ask, hey, what's changing next year? It doesn't feel different. It feels consistent with what you've been saying in all of your branding, all of your marketing. Okay. And that's how you move from the compliance to advisory, how it makes it much easier, much more comfortable, much easier to convert clients to the new advisory type of product. So you educate at scale through your blogs. You reinforce this through your monthly newsletter. Everyone should be sending a monthly newsletter. You stay top of mind through social media, easiest way to push content and your messaging, your thought leadership to your client base. And obviously now with ChatGPT, you're able to do the same thing. So Google AI, ChatGPT, as Rebecca said. So by the time you're doing your tax interviews, you're just confirming the role you've already earned through all the other information you've sent out there. So advisory doesn't feel like a pivot. It's a narrative repeated everywhere. It becomes part of your DNA, okay? So when the narrative changes, your firm changes. You become an advisory firm because you've said it, okay? And you've repeatedly said it. So, keep breaking down. We're going to keep breaking down how this works. I have a bunch of episodes. Again, we're going to try to keep these slower. But for now, start here. Reframe the interview. Reinforce the message, repeat it everywhere. I think you'll have a much more successful move from compliance to advisory. Good luck this tax season. We'll talk to you next week. Again, we're going to keep these hopefully short and concise. Keep your comments and suggestions, subscribers going. We really appreciate it. So that is this week's Growth Minded Accountant. Until next week, have a safe and enjoyable, non-stressful tax season.